Hey guys, so today I will be covering the standard level content of the topic of inheritance as part of the IB biology curriculum. So essentially, inheritance is just the passing down of traits from parents to offsprings. Now, all living beings have DNA, and that DNA makes up a gene, and those genes code for a specific trait or protein within that organism. So let's take, for example, a human chromosome. A human chromosome can have different genes on them, as I said before. So let's imagine that these chromosomes have this gene on it, and this gene codes for eye color. Now, these are two different genes, but they're the same type of gene, but they can have variations within them, and that's called an allele. So an allele is a similar gene with different variants within it. So for example, let's say that this gene is codes for brown eye color, and let's label it big B. And this one codes for blue eye color, and that's a little b. The genotype of this person would be big B, little b, but the phenotype would be brown eye color. And this is because brown eye color is the dominant allele, and the blue eye color is a recessive allele. And what this means is that dominant alleles only need one gene to be expressed, but the recessive alleles need both of them to be expressed. So let's take another person and let's highlight the same gene, except this person has both chromatids with both blue. Sorry, there are people fighting outside my apartment. Let's say they both code for blue eyes. Then their genotype would be BB, but the phenotype would be blue because now there's two recessive genes. However, let's say that these two people have a child. We can then kind of figure out the probability of that child having brown eyes or blue eyes based on the parent's genotype. And we do this by splitting up the chromatids. And we do this because the child will inherit one chromatid from each parent. So from this chromosome, it can either inherit the brown, the one that codes for brown, or the one that codes for blue. And on this parent, on this chromosome, it can inherit only blue. So then we put this on a Punnett square, and then we fill out the Punnett square. So from this Punnett square, we can predict that the chances of them having brown eyes is going to be 50%, and blue eyes is also going to be 50%. Now, it's important to mention that Punnett squares aren't reliable in the sense that they're a probability test. The chances are probably 50-50. However, this might not be necessarily true due to just chance. So, for example, if the parents have 4 children, it might not be that it's split exactly 2 people have brown eyes, 2 people have blue eyes. It might be 3 or 1, or all 4 of them have the same eye color. It's because it's just chance. It's not a practical situation. I feel like another thing about inheritance in the IB is kind of the language surrounding it. So for example, if you have the genotype big B, little b, you would say that the phenotype would then be brown eyes. However, to describe the genotype, you would say that it's heterozygous. So and because it's heterozygous, you would also say that this person is a carrier of the recessive gene because they're not showing it, but they still have that recessive gene and are able to pass it on to their offspring. Then if it's big B, because that's a dominant allele, it's called dominant homozygous. And the same thing with recessive, except it's recessive homozygous. But yeah, I feel like that's all for the basics. It's pretty pretty simple. But yeah, so now we can get to more interesting stuff. For example, codominance.
So I'm sorry for the harsh cut to a different voice, probably. But I got some things wrong in my first recording, and now I'm having to re-record it like a month, like 2 months later. So I'm sorry. But one thing that I have to mention before we get to codominance is the um, the notations for dominant and recessive alleles in blood type and in sex-linked um, like traits are very specific. So before we get to codominance, I just want to talk about that. With actually this diagram's okay. With blood type, you always use this um, type of notation. So A and B, I will get into this later, but A and B blood type are dominant, which means you do a big I and then an A or a B, I guess. And then O is recessive, and it's always represented by a small I. And obviously, because if you have blood type O, you need two O's, so it'll be II, and then A blood type can be AA or AI, and then so on and so forth. So that's blood type. For sex-linked things, it'll tell you like in the question like it's on the X chromosome or Y chromosome. Sometimes you have to figure it out, but it'll tell you. It'll be like this. So it'll be an X for the X chromosome. And then if they have that trait, so for example, hemophilia, I think we had an example question. If the dominant trait is that they do not have it, then it would be a capital and you put it next to the thing. So if the person is a carrier or has it, they would have an X with a small h. And then similar with the Y chromosome, except obviously it's a Y. So if they don't have hemophilia, then it would be a big H, and if they do, it would be a small h. So those are the annotations. I have lost. Because we recently did a test and we had to do inheritance in it, and I lost like 5 marks because I didn't write the correct annotations. Technically, I was correct in my working out and like coming up with the conclusion, but it was it wasn't correct. So be careful with that, please. But yeah, now we can get into codominance. So codominance is essentially when you have two genes that are both expressed at the same time. So for example, not just blood type, which is the one we have to learn for the IB, but like for example, texture of hair. So that's why you get wavy hair as well as curly and straight, because you get codominance, and both the straight hair, so to say, and the wavy hair are being expressed at the same time, causing wavy hair. And the same thing goes with blood type. So in this case, as I said before, O is recessive and A and B are dominant, which is how you get AB blood type, which is codominant. And the really interesting thing about blood type is that you can get, if depending on the alleles that the parents have, you can get one blood type for like equal chances of getting a different blood type. And this is because of the codominance. So, using the right annotations, we can put in this Punnett square. For the child to have a quarter percent, just kidding me, 25% chance of having each blood type, the first parent would have to have A blood type, or an A allele, and an O allele, and the other one would have to have a B allele and then another O allele. And then once we fill this out, you'll see that it'll be 25%. So yeah, now we can see they have a 25% chance of having AB blood type. They have a 25% chance of having B blood type because B is dominant and O is recessive. Please remember that O is recessive and does not do any codominance with A or B. Then we've got 25% chance of A blood and 25% chance of O blood. So, you can get all, if your parents have very specific type of alleles, you're able to get the equal amount of chance of having the same blood type, or all of the different blood types. So yeah, that's codominance.
So, when we're talking about dominance, usually we're talking about one type of allele, right? So, if you've got brown eyes, the dominant one is the brown versus the blue. However, in certain situations, there can be two alleles that are both dominant. For example, not just blood type, but also hair texture. Straight hair and curly hair are both dominant alleles, and so one of the reasons that you can get a mix between curly, wavy, and straight hair is codominance. And the one the IB wants you to know, at least, wants you to recognize is blood types. So you can get O blood type, you can get A blood type, you can get B blood type, but you can also get AB blood type. And essentially, A and B are both dominant alleles. And when you would have an A and a B, because they're both dominant, they are both being expressed, which is what codominance is. Now, O-type blood is recessive, so it's not dominant, so it doesn't act in the way that A and B blood type. So A and B blood type isn't its own thing, it's just a mixture, so to speak, of the A and the B blood type. But the Punnett square would pretty much be the same. So if we take this person and they had an offspring, it would be exactly the same. So this person would have AB blood type, so they would be split up like this. And this person has A blood type with the carrier gene of O blood type. So it would be looking like this. And then we just need to fill it out like before. Now, incomplete dominance is also pretty simple. Essentially, this is when the dominant allele doesn't express fully, so it allows some of the recessive allele to show through. So for example, this would be the dominant allele, and this is the recessive allele. However, the red isn't fully showing through because there's an incomplete dominance. So you end up with a mixture of white and red, and you end up with pink flowers. So, pretty cool as well. Now to polygenic inheritance. Now, when we've been talking about how things have been inherited, we're only talking about one chromosome. So when we're talking here about the eyes, this only shows up on one chromosome. However, there are certain traits, such as hair texture again, such as height, such as skin color, that are found on two different chromosomes. So there are two different genes that code for it, or at least in two different places. So for example, skin color, maybe it can be found, this is not accurate by the way, it could be found on this gene of this chromosome. However, it could also maybe be found on this gene of this chromosome. So now it's not just one chromosome, it's two chromosomes that work together. So there's more range in what the outcome of that child could be. So for example, let's take the example of skin color and let's just make a key. So let's say that big A and big, let's label this one A, and then this one B, just so we don't get confused. Guys, I'm an idiot again. I don't know what I was on when I was recording this, but I got so much wrong. Whenever I say like melanonin or like melatonin or something like that, I mean melanin, like the thing that colors your skin. So, so I'm I'm really sorry. I'll also correct it like with text over it, but like if I say the dumbest stuff, so just be aware that I mean melanin. I'm so sorry. And let's say A means more melanonin, and let's say that little ones mean less. That means that, let's say, then let's take this further. Let's say that these both code for A, and then these ones code for small b and one big B. That means that there is more melatonin being released. However, there are still some drawbacks, so to speak. So there's still one gene that's telling the body don't produce more melatonin. Melatonin? Have I been saying it wrong? I don't know. But let's say we took this this chromosome away, it would be 100% yes, we need more melatonin. But it gets even more complicated when you're talking about inheriting it, because it gives more options to what that child might inherit. So let's say we've got another person and they've got big A, little a, and then big B, little b. Now this gets more complicated on how it's supposed to be plotted out. But for standard level, I don't think you'd need to do this type of crossing over. I think you just need to understand what that means. So I'm going to do it quickly off to the side. So as we can tell from this graph, there's a much wider range of what the traits of the offspring might have. And not only that, but also the range of the phenotype of that. So it goes from having both A and B being big A and big B, and then having only one of the genes be the dominant one. So you would have a wider range of skin colors, because you also have two little b's, one little a, so you would have a wider range of what is possible for that child to inherit. And that's why this would be a continuous variation. So polygenic variation is usually continuous versus monogenic, which is what we saw before, where it's only found on one. So polygenic is a continuous variation, whereas monogenic, which is what we saw before, where the genes are only found on one chromosome and only that gene controls that trait, would be discontinuous or discrete variation. So it's either yes or no, versus in polygenic, that is a kind of constant flow. And from polygenic, you also get this average line. So most people in the world, or for example in this data, would be this skin color, and then this would be the range. So people with really, really light skin and also really, really dark skin would be less likely to occur versus the highest point. So yeah, that's polygenic inheritance. The last thing about inheritance that we need to know is pedigree charts. Pedigree charts essentially show you how the traits are passed down from every generation, to kind of show you if it's a recessive trait, if it's a dominant trait, if it's a sex-linked trait, not trade. So for example, in this one, the red ones are the affected people and the blue ones are the non-affected people. I think what we can tell from this pedigree chart is that the gene is recessive. That affects the thing because this person is affected, however, this person isn't. And they create children that only two of them are affected, but three of them are. So this person must be a recessive, must have two recessive genes for it, because if it was a dominant gene, then these three children would also be affected by it. So they must have the recessive. So let's just label those R. However, this person must have at least one dominant gene and one recessive gene. So they must be a heterozygous carrier. So maybe they are big R, little r. And we know this because if these people are affected by it, then that means that there has to be at least one recessive gene within this person. But they are also one affected, so therefore they must also have a dominant gene for it. So that a dominant gene that makes them not affected by it. So yeah, that's all for inheritance. It's a lot, I know, but I believe we can do this. But yeah, that's all. I'll leave the poster for the whiteboard down below. Thank you for watching.